gone on a bit of a tirade recently, debunking when people say that certain things in Naruto just don't make sense. Whether it be tenjutsus that don't make sense or perceived plot holes, for as long as Naruto has existed, people have tried to poke holes in it. And honestly, that's fair. It's not a perfect story, and there is absolutely some holes to find and poke. However, one of the coolest things about the Naruto universe is that it is so incredibly expansive. With 700 chapters of the manga, 700 episodes of the anime, and a dozen or so light novels that you can dive into at any moment. Really, any hole that can be perceived in the Naruto universe can be filled if you know enough. Yes, if you've only read the manga once or only watched the anime once, you're gonna look back at the story and say, what happened? However, as you get into Boruto and you get into the light novels and you really start thinking about the information we've been given from this universe, it feels as though the more information we get, the more the holes in the story get patched. And when it comes down to it, if that's not a reason to read Boruto, I don't know what is. See, while Boruto was marred as a story that couldn't possibly live up to the standard that Naruto set, a thing that a lot of people don't read Boruto don't realize is that Boruto is not only a fun story that stands on its own two legs, but it's also the continuance and the mending of an existing universe. Multiple of the biggest, most lingering questions that Naruto left us with were answered in Boruto, and we might have just got another one. See, one of the biggest questions that I had after everything was all said and done in the Naruto universe, because I'm weird, was why does wood release absorb chakra from tailed beasts? Why would it absorb chakra from tailed beasts but not humans? Why would it absorb chakra from tailed beasts but not sages? It's simply only absorbing the chakra of tailed beasts just doesn't make sense. And yet time and time again, the only entities we ever see being suppressed by the usage of wood release are tailed beasts. Is it because tailed beasts are made out of nature chakra and trees are nature? Is it because trees inherently absorb nutrients and water to grow? Or was it a convenient way to describe how Hashirama caught all the tailed beasts? Well, I would reckon that none of these explanations are correct. But these are the points that Naruto fans have been positing for years to answer this exact question. But in chapter 17 of Boruto's 2 Blue Vortex, we may have finally got the answer to that question. And that answer completely redefines how we have to think about wood release and the people who use it. And thus today we're going to be blowing minds and changing rhetorics, because today we're talking everything we knew about wood release was wrong. But before we get to blowing minds or changing rhetorics, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So, we've understood that wood release seals the chakra of the tailed beasts for a long time now. And we learned that wood release was effective against tailed beasts at the same time that Hashirama did. See, because Hashirama didn't find himself toe-to-toe in a battle against the tailed beasts until Madara went off and put Kurama under his Genjutsu with the Sharingan to ride into battle against Hashirama on him like a horse of sorts. However, in that moment, Hashirama had to use the most powerful weapon at his disposal. The only weapon that would possibly allow for him to counteract the massive power of Madara and Kurama combined. And in that moment, Hashirama decided to use wood release against this dynamic duo. And thank God he did. See, because say what you want about Hashirama having a way higher offensive output at the time of his battle against Madara at the Valley of the End, at the end of the day, one of the big reasons that Hashirama was able to come out of that battle successful was because wood release has a type advantage against tailed beasts. Now, as to how much that type advantage came into play, we can't necessarily say, because after all, Madara did put a Susanoo on Kurama, which means that Hashirama's wood release should have had difficulty reaching Kurama in the first place to suck up and suppress his chakra. However, when you're able to make a 1,000 armed Kanon that is several times taller than the mountains you're near, you can just punch that Susanoo right off and get to suppressing. Now, Hashirama would use the information that he gathered from this battle against Kurama and Madara to go on to catch 7 of the other 9-tailed beasts, all of them but Shukaku, who was caught by the first Kazekage in the Land of Wind. And then he would go on in an attempt to pacify the newly founded ninja villages to sell each and every single one of the ninja villages a tailed beast or 2. And thus, Hashirama's wood release not only allowed for him to come out victorious in battle against Madara, but it also allowed him to set up Konoha financially for the next century. All because wood release was able to suppress the chakra of the tailed beasts. And Hashirama isn't even the only person we've seen do this. Yamato, who was the successful experiment of Orochimaru trying to recreate Hashirama's wood release, was specifically assigned to training Naruto and Shippuden so Naruto could train to access Kurama's power. Well, more so that Naruto could train without worrying about accidentally accessing too much of Kurama's power. And we've seen wood release suppress the chakra of tailed beasts at the highest possible level. See, taking it even one step beyond Kurama, Hashirama was able to use his god deity gates to hold down the Ten Tails, albeit temporarily. And there's an argument to be made here, as the Hashirama that was brought back to life was not Prime Hashirama, that a Prime Hashirama probably would have been able to hold down the Ten Tails maybe indefinitely. While we do see Hashirama use these same god deity gates against the likes of Jubito, unfortunately they have roughly the same amount of success, but they do see some success. Now, so far as we've seen, Hashirama's only ever tried to use these gates against the Ten Tails and Ten Tails Jinchurikis like Jubito, and that may be for a specific reason. See, because we've never seen Wood Release work in any suppressing capacity on anything that wasn't a tailed beast of sorts. Wood Release has shown the ability to suppress tailed beast chakra and the chakra of the Jinchurikis of those tailed beasts. Never regular people. At least, kind of. See, we've only ever seen one person's chakra react to Wood Release in a way that could be taken as, oh, the Wood Release is absorbing their chakra. And that one person is none other than our MC Naruto. Now, when I say Wood Release is reacting to Naruto's chakra, I mean when Naruto releases a massive amount of chakra around Wood Release blooms. The Wood Release that comes into contact with Naruto's chakra grows greenery and flowers, which seems to imply that in some capacity it is absorbing energy from Naruto and translating that into growth. However, unfortunately, even coming to that conclusion is a bit of a stretch, because in very real circumstances where Hashirama's Wood Release has actively been absorbing chakra from things like Kurama, we've never seen his Wood Release or anybody's Wood Release bloom when coming into contact with chakra it's been absorbing. And therefore, another one of the biggest mysteries in Naruto is why Wood Release blooms when it comes into contact with it. Now, you could pretty easily just say that it's Kurama's chakra bubbling out of Naruto that causes for the Wood Release around him to bloom. And even though we haven't seen the Wood Release that's come into contact with Kurama by himself bloom, it's probably fair to reason that that was just an afterthought that Kishimoto didn't draw in or the animators decided to not go with. Sure, on top of this, Naruto is frequently talked about having an incredibly radiant and potent chakra signature. The most famous circumstance being when Karin saw his chakra for the first time, referring to it as warm, like the sun. And as Naruto is the literal reincarnation of the sun side of the sun and moon seal, and Asura, a living testament to Hagoromo's will, it would make sense that Naruto's chakra signature would feel warm, like the sun. And since the sun is highly important in growing greenery like flowers and trees, maybe because Naruto's aura is like that of the sun, it leads to blooming of Wood Release. Now, that is the conclusion I would come to if I didn't have more evidence. However, we know from Naruto's first clash with the White Zetsu that Wood Release is not the only thing he makes bloom. Now, I can already hear a couple of you yelling,
"Go up and Nick, the White Zetsu, they are Wood Release."
No, they're not. Now, the White Zetsu have Wood Release. Yes, absolutely. But the White Zetsu only have Wood Release because all of the White Zetsu are infused with Hashirama's cells by Madara. White Zetsu are people, specifically victims of the first time that Kaguya used Infinite Tsukiyomi, a supposedly 100,000 deep army that supposedly represents the entirety of the population of the Earth the first time that Kaguya used Infinite Tsukiyomi, augmented with Hashirama's DNA to allow them to use Wood Release.
But Nick, they're able to control their bodies and make themselves look like different things and turn their arms into trees and shoot wood out of their palms.
Yes, they are able to do all of that. But it doesn't mean that they themselves are Wood Release. In fact, the way the White Zetsu act is really no different from how we've seen Hashirama's cells work on anybody. Whether it was Danzo or Madara grafting Hashirama's cells onto their body, we've seen that Hashirama's cells do not act like regular tissue. It gives you a super boost in chakra and allows you to tap into his Sage mode. And if we're being real, the White Zetsu's ability to use Wood Release and the amount of questions that revolve around their anatomy can basically all be tied back to the God trait. So really, actually, the only reason that there's a massive misconception about how the White Zetsu were created is because Madara believes that the White Zetsu are beings created by the God tree that were augmented with Hashirama's DNA. But in actuality, as we learned later on, the White Zetsu are just the victims of the first Infinite Tsukiyomi, who had their chakra sapped into that God tree over the course of thousands of years. And therefore, a lot of Naruto fans come to the conclusion that the reason that the White Zetsu are able to use Wood Release is because of the Hashirama DNA that they all have. And while that is a valid conclusion to come to, I'd like to shift our attention to Boruto, where products seemingly made from either a Ten Tails or a God tree in the Shinju that have no connection to Hashirama whatsoever, also have the ability to use wood release, as both Jura and Matsuri have shown us. And while the Shinju are not white zetsu, I can see that point, the two of them are as close to each other as they possibly could be. So there's really no way for us to know if the white zetsu were simply going to have wood release after being turned into white zetsu, or if it was Hashirama's DNA augmentation that allowed them that ability. But because a lot of what we know about the white zetsu comes from an unreliable narrator in Madara, who didn't know anything about the white zetsu and only really knew what black zetsu wanted him to think he knew, can't really take all the information that we think we have about the white zetsu at 100% authenticity. All this is to say that the white zetsu are not made from wood release. They are people who have Hashirama's DNA and who were made by the God Tree. All this is important because it's established in the first time that Naruto in KCM1 comes into contact with these white zetsu, that when he knocks out these white zetsu, they turn back into trees, which Killer B actively in the moment compares to what Naruto did to Yamato's wood release while he was releasing his chakra in training. So Naruto's chakra seemingly has the same effect on both wood release and white zetsus. Cool. What does that mean? Doesn't that just prove that white zetsus are made from wood release? I mean, if they're treated the exact same way as wood release, wouldn't that be a logical conclusion to come to? And like, yeah, kind of, if they were wood release. But as we just established, they are not. And therefore, if the white zetsu are not wood release, what's the similarity between the two of them? Well, my answer would be the God Tree. See, for the longest time, we've assumed that wood release absorbs the chakra of tailed beasts because wood is from nature, and the tailed beasts are made out of nature energy. We've even gone so far as to assume that because Hashirama was a sage, and possibly a sage that aligned somewhere with trees, that because he was bumping his senjutsu chakra into the wood that he was creating, that senjutsu chakra reacted with the nature chakra of the tailed beast and sucked it in towards Hashirama as the source. But unfortunately, this line of logic falls apart when you consider the fact that Yamato is also able to use wood release to suppress the chakra of tailed beasts, and he himself is not a sage. And you can get around that point by saying,
but Yamato's got Hashirama's cells, and we saw on Madara that Hashirama's cells allow you to tap into his senjutsu.
But that doesn't make any sense when you consider the fact that Madara, one of the greatest ninjas of all time, had to actively apply himself to figure out Hashirama's sage mode. So it seems, just for some reason, that wood release suppresses tailed beast chakra. So is it because they're both made with nature energy? Is it because wood is from nature and nature energy is from nature? Is it because trees naturally absorb nutrients from the ground around them to grow? Well, if we're going forward with the line of logic that things from nature have the ability to absorb chakra from other things from nature, then basically all elemental ninjutsu would be able to suppress the chakra of the tailed beasts. Earth release comes from nature, water release comes from nature, and while arguments could be made against things like fire, lightning, and wind, if trees just being from nature and therefore having the ability to absorb and suppress nature energy is the only explanation we have, then unfortunately those same arguments would apply to things like earth and water release. And yet earth and water release don't have the ability to suppress tailed beast chakra. What makes this point even more perplexing, if you are going through with the mentality that because trees are from nature they can suppress nature energy, is that we've actively seen from Kabuto and Momoshiki the ability to breathe energy into inanimate objects. And in fact, we know that people who become sages in Ryuchi Cave gain this ability. So that is to say that when we see Kabuto create a giant earthen golem, that means that inanimate, nature-based objects like earth or possibly even water have the ability to absorb nature energy, specifically from Ryuchi Cage Sage Mode users, but still. Okay, Nick, you pause it then. What about if it's because trees are alive? Water's not alive, the earth isn't alive, and yeah, that's fair. Trees are alive, water and the earth aren't. Like, on a broad sense.
Oh, what about the germs?
I'm not talking about the germs. I'm not talking about the microbes. I'm saying, is dirt a living organism? It's not. However, if controlling a living element with your ninjutsu is all you need to be able to do to absorb tailed beast chakra, then Shikatsu Myaku, which allows for you to control bones, which are very much as alive as trees are, and to some extent, some summoning jutsus, would allow you to suppress tailed beast chakra. And we know that Shikatsu Myaku doesn't suppress tailed beast chakra because we saw Gaara fight Kimimaru. So what if the fact that the wood that's being controlled with wood release being alive isn't the prerequisite that allows for it to suppress the chakra of tailed beasts? If instead, the real reason that all wood release appears to be able to suppress the chakra of tailed beasts is because it ties its literal roots back to the God Tree. See, because Matsuri in chapter 17 established that all across the globe that Naruto exists in, that there are roots deep underground, even in places like the desert, where there absolutely should not be roots, like biologically speaking. And all of these deep tree roots communicate with Matsuri, who appears to be able to, like the person that she came from, Moegi, to be able to use wood release. And Matsuri is shown the ability to use that wood release by being able to control these tree roots to create Ryu and heal Hidari. Now, while one could reckon that the globe of the Naruto world is just different from ours and there's tree roots everywhere for some reason, but the much more likely explanation here is that because Infinite Tsukiyomi has been fired off twice in this world, and every time Infinite Tsukiyomi is fired off, the god tree has to grow roots to every single person on Earth to cocoon them and turn them into a white zetsu, that those roots that had to stretch across the entire globe twice are still very much intact deep underground in the Naruto world. And every single time we've ever seen wood release used, it was those roots being brought back to the surface. Not only does this explain why Jura and Matsuri and presumably all of the Shinju are able to use wood release when they are often referred to as walking divine trees, but it also explains perfectly as to why wood release can suppress the chakra of the tailed beasts, but not your average human. See, because if we are assuming that every time we've ever seen wood release used in Naruto, it has been people like Hashirama controlling the roots of the god tree from any corner of the planet, think about for a second what a god tree is. It's a 10 tails that eats an Otsutsuki, and once it absorbs all of the chakra from the planet, it turns into a chakra fruit that's later consumed. But at its most basal nature, a god tree is a 10 tails. Now, think about what the 9-tailed beasts are. They are the energy split into 9 parts of a 10 tails. And so it makes sense that not only would these roots have the ability to absorb the chakra of these 9-tailed beasts, as in a way this is just using the chakra of a 10 tails against a 10 tails, but also it would make sense as to why these roots would absorb the power of the 9-tailed beasts, as the entire purpose of the god tree, the Geto statue, the Akatsuki arc, and the Fourth Great Shinobi World War was to collect the 9-tailed beasts, pull them back into the husk of the 10 tails, the Geto statue, have that Geto statue turn back into a 10 tails, turn that 10 tails into a divine tree, and eat the chakra fruit that comes from it. So if the entire purpose of Naruto Shippuden was to collect the 9-tailed beasts, bring all their chakra back together in order to feed it to a god tree of sorts, wouldn't it stand to reason that wood release would also try to absorb the chakra of these 9-tailed beasts to circumvent, the Fourth Great Shinobi World War? Not only does this explanation make a fair amount of sense and lines up perfectly with what's going on in Boruto right now, it also explains why the white zetsu and wood release respond the same way to Naruto's chakra, as they both have the same origin, the god tree. And therefore, ironically, without knowing it, every single time somebody has used wood release to suppress the chakra of the 9-tailed beasts, they could have, in a way, been giving energy to the root system of the existing god trees. And while the god tree that was made during the Fourth Great Shinobi World War was absorbed by Madara, who later turned into Kaguya, who was sealed inside of the moon, the god tree that Kaguya got chakra from originally still exists on Earth. We don't know where it is, we don't know what it's doing, but we do know that it exists. We never see it get destroyed. And therefore, as all of these root systems have undoubtedly become intertwined in some capacity or another, every single time wood release has been used on a tailed beast, energy could have been being fed to that god tree, which, mind you, for buying Kaguya's initial story at face value, was able to create a chakra fruit of its own simply by existing on Earth. So it's a possibility that actually the creation of the Shinju has been a long time in the making. And this is corroborated by the fact that when Jura is battling against Himawari in chapter 11, while marveling at her rapid ability to heal from the injuries that he's inflicting upon her, he tells Himawari that she is, and I quote, far beyond human or Jinchuriki levels, something almost like that what we Bijou possess. And while everybody at this point knows that Jura is the 10 tails, Jura is referring to all of the Shinju as Bijou, which seems to imply that either by splitting up the adolescent 10-tailed chakra, or because of the chakra that's been funneling through the root systems to the tree that possibly created the Shinju in the first place, that the Shinju are Bijou, on top of being divine trees. Makes sense because that's how Bijous and divine trees work. Anyways, all of this is to say that I think we've been wrong about wood release forever, and that those who use wood release aren't combining earth and water release to actively make or control wood. Rather, they're using a Kekkei Genkai to control the roots of the god tree, which brings a whole new meaning to calling Hashirama the god of Shinobi. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you believe this could be a possible explanation as to what's going on with Wood Release, or do you think I've lost my mind finally? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell.
Now I gotta film a Raycon ad.
Sounded like Hootie there.